From our analysis of all of these manuscripts, scholars have been able to figure out tendencies that scribes make. So, like we talked about some of the mistakes that you see. And so we found the tendency of scribes. What kind of mistakes do scribes tend to make? But we also have figured out what are the tendencies of scribes when they do change things. Why and how do they tend to do that? And because of that, this is what we found is that we prefer a shorter reading to a longer reading. Because what we found from scribes, Jack's kind of hinted at this, they believe that we're talking about Christian scribes. So the text is important. They believe that the text is inspired. And because of that, from all the evidence that we have, it is very rare for a scribe to remove something and make a text shorter, unless they do it by accident, which I mentioned, that's pretty obvious when they accidentally skip a section or something like that. We can generally figure that out. But intentionally, scribes generally never delete something because they believe these to be inspired texts from God. What's much more likely is for a scribe to add to in order to explain. And sometimes the way that this happens, and this just might be interesting, you can actually go see this in some older manuscripts, is sometimes a scribe will make a notation in the margin to explain something in the text. And the next person copying it will intentionally, or sometimes unintentionally, because they don't know, well, is this a note or was this original? They'll move it into the text.
Yep.
And so it's much more likely for a scribe to make a text longer than shorter. So when you're comparing text, it's much more likely for the shorter text to be original than the longer. It's much more likely for the harder reading to be original than the easier reading, because scribes have the tendency to change something to make it easier to understand, not to change something to make it harder to understand. And that kind of makes sense for us when we were copying. So an example is in the Gospel of Mark, there's this man with leprosy who comes up to Jesus. And some texts say that Jesus looks at the man and he becomes angry. And other texts say that he is moved with compassion. So the harder reading is angry because it's hard to understand, why does Jesus become angry when he looks at this man? And so that one, in my opinion, is original, because the question comes up, why on earth would a scribe change compassion to anger? That doesn't make any sense. That makes it harder to understand. It makes a lot more sense for a scribe to change it from angry to compassion, because that makes the text a little bit easier to understand. So harder reading is favored as compared to the easier reading.